I think that the homeowner exemption on taxes on the gain, I think that should be repealed, but in favor of mortgage deductibility. Just that will probably balance it out. So I'm not saying if you have a house now, you have to pay
You're
tax
gonna
on your
get
gain, but
you're gonna get
You're
killed in
gonna
the
get
comments, Jason. That
killed,
just
bro.
maybe
that's
that's all
that's
right.
That's
that's
okay.
a sensitive one. Yeah.
We've got our guest already waiting. TK. This guy's excited. He's ready and raring to go. There's a lot to talk about. We got a
That's good
real
stuff.
guest for a change, not like a social media guest. We got like a real guest.
Well, you know what? This show, the Toronto Real Estate Show, I mean the Canadian Real Estate Show,
The Canadian Toronto Real Estate Show.
has got a long history of real guests, Daryl.
A
Long
long,
history of real guests. Some more real than others.
some more real than others.
Some more real
Some
than others.
could be taken more seriously than others. That's for damn sure.
Some were invited back, others were not.
That
But
is a good way of putting it.
the co-hosts are still the same,
The
much
co-hosts
to
are still the
everybody's
same,
disappointment.
much to
But
most people.
but I can tell you one thing for sure is the Canadian Real Estate Show is here to stay. All right.
Forever. Like
We're gonna fund this thing until the grave, okay?
That's
Until
right.
Daryl and I are old, until the AI versions of us are running the show. So
That's right.
if you don't like us, too bad.
we are working on AI versions because I am getting tired, TK. I
We'll
am
do
getting
daily
old.
shows. We'll do daily shows at that point.
Daily shows with AI.
Really, like how much worse could it be?
No,
Yeah.
I mean with AI. I mean,
AI.
who would even know?
They're probably better than us.
Some people think that we're paid for propaganda, TK. Some people think that we're morons, and some people think that we're geniuses.
Absolute geniuses.
What the hell is going on here?
Who's right? You know
Who
what?
is right?
I guess time will tell.
Time will tell. I mean, if you look back, we look like all of the above throughout the
At
years.
some point
TK.
in time.
At some point in time, we have looked brilliant. We have
Yeah.
looked foolish. And we have, what was the third
we've looked
option?
good. We've looked good.
We've definitely looked good doing it. There's
looked
no
good.
doubt.
There you go. Well, let's just your mic's on mute. But let's just get it's on mute, not the plug. But let's just get
How the hell
let's just get the
did
guest
that
on.
happen?
I don't know.
You want to just get the guest on right away?
Forget it. Let's go.
Right away? No,
Bring him
I want to
in.
know. I want to know what's going on with TK.
We'll talk. We'll talk. We'll get him on. Let's go. People
gonna
don't
get
care
him
about
on?
me. Come on, let's go.
I think people care about you.
No, nobody cares.
Nobody cares about TK.
No.
I think we need some therapy, buddy. Hold on a sec.
I care about myself. That's all
You
that matters.
care about yourself? I hope so. Okay, here we go. We got a heavyweight, and I don't know how I met him. I feel like, hey, Jason, are you there? Can you get your video going? There he is.
Right here, guys.
Good
Look at
day,
that.
sir. How are you?
Look at that
Pretty
view.
good. Sunny day out, right?
Look at the
Things in the
view.
air.
Is this your office? Is this the view from
This-
your office?
This is my office. Yeah, this is where all the magic happens.
Where all the magic happens.
You're,
So
you're
hold
on
on.
like the 50th floor, but that building behind you, it's like a 70-story tower.
90.
We're young and eggs, so nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
But I get to get a firsthand view of when they open the LRT, which hopefully is in the next few months, I guess.
Yeah, they announced that they're going to open it, but just we're still waiting for a date, I think, right?
Wow, the intersection looks nice and clear, and congratulations to Metrolinx on a 15-year project.
Yeah, well
It
done,
should have
everybody.
taken 5 years, right?
Fees.
I wouldn't speak too soon on that one there.
Yeah,
but
it's not over yet.
I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic.
So do you want to introduce yourself? Because I don't even know how I mean, I know what you do. I know what your company's called, but I don't. We have a serious guest, TK. Like, this guy is no joke. Okay, this
Wow.
guy
He's
owns
on the- he's
so
on the fif-
much.
He's on the
so
50th
much-
floor at Young and Egg. He's
but so much
as
real
serious as it gets.
estate. I had the pleasure of meeting him for lunch one day, and he was just kind of nonchalantly telling me about, the thousands of doors he owns. It's amazing the company that he has. So this is
Yeah,
going to be
we've done okay.
Yeah, you've done great. And like, what a perspective that we get to, dig into a little bit here, TK. This is a good time for somebody like this to be on the show. There's a lot going on out there, right, Chase?
Where you going? What should the people do?
What?
Yeah, like, comment, subscribe. I'm double subscribed. Do it yourself. Didn't get to fix the show, though. Didn't get to fix the show.
I think there is. I can probably lend some perspective to the situation, maybe based on my experiences and a little bit of history. Yeah, we're the company's called Bow Properties. We're focused and concentrated in the multi-res space in mostly Toronto, but we have assets also in Ottawa and Calgary, in New York City and Los Angeles. Again, primarily multi-res, but retail also. And it's a business that my grandfather initially started in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where we no longer have any assets, but it happened for a long time. I was born there, and left at an early age. My parents were both raised there, and everyone was essentially immigrants from Poland before the war. And they made a pretty good life in Winnipeg, but I think with the passage of time and just the way Canada evolved over the years, my dad, who kind of really grew the business exponentially, didn't see a whole lot of future in Winnipeg. So we moved here and he started buying apartment buildings, 70s and 80s, flipping a bit, and eventually sort of settled down to the model of just what you guys would call maybe value add and pay down debt and look for new interesting deals. That model from kind of the solo operator with partners perspective really dried up a lot. Call it in the mid 90s when or late 90s when they changed the rules in our favor so that there was very strict rent control. People think today it's strict rent control, it's nothing. You used to not be able to get an increase on turnover that was above a very meager inflationary index, sort of similar to now, but you didn't have vacancy decontrol. You guys know the term. And that lift off essentially took away a lot of the incentive for private guys to do deals, and institutions came in, REITs came in. So we did a few deals here and there, and we just sort of branched out, started doing other things. I joined my dad after in the business after law school in New York City and practicing law for a little bit around 2002. I guess I transitioned my way back here. So I've been doing this full time for 24 years or whatever. And it's been exposed to it since birth. But multifamily is a very stable asset. I think no matter what market you're in, if you aren't over leveraged, so people always have a demand for that end use of a roof over your head. We tend to focus on urban stuff for better or worse. It's certainly been to our benefit over the long term. It's been a little more of a rocky road the last few years, and now vacancies are up a bit, but we like urban because of the diversification and the less reliance on one or two industries. So and I guess we're seeing a bit of that in the trade wars going on right now.
Are you looking for the best merch store on the planet? Well, we got the shit for you. Coming in at low prices where we barely make any money off of whatsoever, you can get the greatest real estate merchandise on this platform. Just look at this very flamboyant man putting on this great stuff. He looks great, he's dancing great, and boy does he look sexy in that merchandise. I tell you, buy this for anybody, you buy this for yourself. You will be not only repping the greatest Canadian real estate podcast in this world, but you will also be looking hella good doing it.
Great. Well, great introduction. We're happy to have you. We're definitely all about that. So you're a great guest to come on and share some experiences. I think you're absolutely right when it comes to people keeping a roof over their head, no matter what the economy is like. It's a necessity, right?
It's not
and
going
we saw
out of
that.
fashion.
We saw that with the COVID stuff. So it was like, office space and then, retail space and now shopping malls and all that kind of stuff. Multifamily just kept on doing well. And if you look at where cap rates are still today, I mean, they're pretty low considering where interest rates are, like in perspective from where they were before. So there's the demand is obviously still there and the values are holding.
Yeah, definitely. And Toronto, was hit hard by COVID because of that exodus, and equally strong return to the city probably around 22-ish. And then obviously that massive influx of immigration, really just, went straight to our bottom line in a sense. And then turnover became an issue. And now we're in what I think some would call a healthy market, but we're having to work a lot harder to keep everything full. That said, we are full, and we always think we will be because we're in A locations, just essentially what I consider entry level rental in A locations. We also have some condos we rent out and manage, but it's primarily our own product. We have some partners here and there, but it's cap rates absolutely. What happened in Toronto multi-res or even the Canadian space was just way less transactions. I think cap rates definitely ticked up a little, but what you just saw were way less deals. People just couldn't pencil things out anymore. But again, from a private investor perspective or a partnership perspective, it didn't really pencil out much anyway for a while because we're really just cash flow investors at the end of the day. As much as we've seen pretty good growth over the decades in the markets we've been in. We like cash flow, and that really hasn't worked out too well on certain price points. But I was looking at some, I think it was Collier's stats recently, and I was surprised to see prices holding up because of the bottom line is still pretty strong, but rents are very flat now. So it's I love shooting the shit on this stuff all day long, to get different perspectives, to share mine. I think my perspective is a little different because I'm not really promoting anything. Although I am a GP, a co-GP in a couple deals. So in that sense we are, but it wasn't capital that I raised. It was more my partner's end of it. So, but we do get a promoted interest from that perspective, but it's just a different ball game, right? Like, I don't know. I listen to you guys all the time. I really appreciate your perspective on Toronto, and there's not a lot of Toronto centric content out there. I really think you guys are doing a great job with that. And it's good to hear what's going on the ground, so to speak, because I'm heavy these days in management mode, just doing what we can to, like I said, keep the lights on and keep the bills paid and keep everybody happy. And notwithstanding Olivia Chow, we're still able to do that.
Right. Well, so we hear in the news and we read articles that say demand is down for rentals. I know you said that you're still full and that you're working harder, but I think the main story out there is that rental demand is down, rents are plummeting, and people are heading for the hills. I imagine that's more the the investors that were created in Toronto and BC, the geniuses that just put money into things that didn't cash flow that they plan to sell years later. But do you not, like, you're smiling when I say demand is down?
It is. When you completely turn off the tap of international, what is it, temporary foreign workers, students, et cetera, and that reverses, you've got a huge wave of demand that's just dissipated. But you still, and I've been trying to find, it's hard to get granular data, right? You could ask ChatGPT, you can Google around, but did the GTA grow last year? And the answer is yeah, by a ton. At the end of 24, I think it was 300,000 people. I pulled up a stat. The GTA is now 7.1 million. Can you guys believe that? I'm shocked. Right. So the projection is this year that will level out, but I think you're still going to see an influx, even though Canada's maybe neutral. They're still going to see more in the GTA. So that keeps things afloat. But again, we're sort of pushing against the tide of 30,000 completions. I don't know what that number is of new condos, and eventually that's competition for me. Certainly Young and Egg, where I have a big building, you got to have a sharper pen, but no one can beat us on price because of our cost basis and our operating basis, and that scenario. But if you bought a condo and your plan was to leverage it a little and rent it out, you're certainly not going to see any cash flow. I think if it's totally unlevered, your return on whatever you want to call value is today is probably at the most 2%, between the fees and property taxes. So, figure that out. If you're borrowing money at 5%, like it's not a healthy scenario, but I would expect it to last a couple of years or so. And in the meantime, a lot of those units get cleared by the market, I would think. Notwithstanding one of your previous guests there, I won't name them, but kind of denigrating small units with stupid names. A small unit, someone's home, right? And a lot of them, although they're small, they're a brand new kitchen, a brand new bathroom, generally in a brand new building with amazing amenities in a neighborhood with amazing amenities in Toronto, right? So I'm sorry, somebody wants to live there. It may not be a young family, but I guarantee you there's a warm body out there that wants that unit at the right price. So that stuff will clear. And you got to get creative. But from our end of it, like we, when the market gives us a signal, we rezone a building and a piece of land and say, hey, let's put up a building here. Generally with a partner. We've done a lot of retail development more on our own, but the high-rise stuff, we were very, very, very cautious. And we partnered with Tridel on a deal. I was telling Darryl when we met, and it went pretty well. But these are multi-year things, and if the market's strong, sure, go for it. But those things, there's so many moving parts, and I'm just really cautious when that happens. And forget about today. I saw signs that the market was overheating back in 22 and 3, so I put everything I had on hold, and I certainly didn't go out and buy land. But I've got some very good sites if the market ever comes back. So fortunately, it's not my overhead structure and the way my company works. I don't have to build to keep the lights on. So if I did, I'd be struggling a lot, I'm sure.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
Darryl and I probably have a lot of questions. We'll have to take turns here because we've got so
yeah.
much stuff on the go.
Yeah.
So you talked about partnering up with Tridel, and you talked about new construction and all that kind of stuff. How do you see right now, as the perspective from a development standpoint, is this an environment that anybody's going to be building new construction purpose-built rentals at scale?
Yeah, I mean, that to me, I was sharing with Darryl when we last got together. That's never really made sense to me with private capital because there's just too many risks. Like if assuming you're the best builder out there, or builder, not developer, and you can meet your budget, I still don't see returns that are on paper over 5%. And I'm probably being generous. I have to say I don't know the exact construction cost today, but someone close to me, a family member, did mention somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 a foot, not including land. Now, maybe his data was, a year old or whatever, and maybe prices have come down, but I just don't see how that makes any sense. So the people doing that to me are institutional. They're either stuck with a property that was a condo project and now they don't know what to do. So they're saying, well, I don't want to sell this property at a fire sale. And I'm not going to make a good return on a pickleball court. I don't know. You tell me. So maybe I'll just try to put up a rental building. I mean, to me, it's risky. Like there's so many better things you could do with your risk capital, including buying existing buildings and giving them some TLC. I don't know. I'm a huge fan of existing buildings. Again, provided you know what you're doing and you do your due diligence and make sure that there's no crazy deferred maintenance that's going to come and bite you in the butt. But the new rental stuff to me is an enigma in a sense because every tenant in there is paying market rent or sometimes more. So that means they're very carefully scrutinizing the market and saying, should I stay? And, and they're generally not communities. So, they run more like a hotel, which is great, but you got to service them like hotels. So that's my concern. And again, they're giant projects, right? Generally speaking, to get off the ground. So
you're saying that when people when you're in a lower price point, people aren't necessarily thinking about leaving at all. They're trying to figure out how to stay. Yeah.
I mean, sure. The guy that rented from you last year for 2,700, and now maybe you're re-renting for 26 or 25. He may come knocking on your door when his lease is up. Probably not, because he's not going to go move into the trouble of moving for a couple $100. But generally speaking, in older buildings, you're looking at people for the most part paying below market because over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a lot of escalation, and we probably have a third of our buildings or more that are $1,000 below market or something like that. So they have nowhere to go.
And they pay on time, and they don't call you to change the light bulbs because they just want you to leave them alone because they know they're getting a good deal.
I give full credit to my amazing staff, and I rely on them so much, and they do their jobs well, and I think we treat our tenants fairly. That's our policy. There's obviously going to be people that are unhappy sometimes, but again, you got to screen your tenants properly. You got to service them properly. They're customers, no matter um, what level of rent they're paying. So we treat them that way, and it's worked out pretty well. But it's not easy. I mean, if anything, if I could ask the provincial government one favor on rent control, it would be just enforce your own laws. Like don't make my friend wait a year to evict someone for non-payment or the stupidest reasons, right? Because it's really not fair to the landlord. It's not fair to a tenant out there who wants that unit and is going to pay and not bother anyone.
Mm.
So,
Good perspective.
Since social media has gotten larger and people have kind of spread ideas around about how to not pay taxes and long waits at the landlord tenant board,
yeah.
like since I guess COVID, that probably accelerated. How often do people fuck around?
I mean, more now than last year because the market is not as tight. So, and the economy's not as good. So people will have more complaints. Again, we run it like an institutional investment, even though we're not an institution. So, we're fortunate to not let people take advantage and to, move quickly. So it's not a huge, it's never been our budget, right? Like that we put a vacancy bad debt allowance in, but we don't meet it generally. So haven't, obviously during COVID, that was a very exceptional time. Hopefully we don't get back to that, but, um, and again, it's a function of screening the tenants properly on the outset. I'm not saying it can't happen. Obviously, you got to be prepared for the worst. And you know what? When we did our budgets this year, I was talking to my COO and we were talking about vacancy, and I'm like, ratchet it up a bit. I mean, who knows what the trade war is gonna, who knows what sort of damage it's going to inflict. I think we got off okay yesterday. It seems like it. I guess we'll have to. It's amazing how everyone can have a different spin on it depending on, I guess, what party you want to win and what your take on
Isn't
it
it
is. But
crazy?
yeah, I mean, it seemed like if the three of us had this call 4 months ago or whatever it was when Trump first started talking about tariffs, the prevailing wisdom was, or the conventional wisdom was, yeah, there'll be some tariffs on Canada, it won't be too bad. That's exactly what happened. So we went through this spell of complete misery and internal angst and strife. And personally, I think it's insane the backlash against America. You can love or hate Trump. It's up to you. I don't care either way. Make your opinions to what felt. It doesn't bother me. But Americans in America are not our enemy. They're our closest ally. And maybe I say that because I live there a long time. I do a lot of business there. I travel there personally. Family has property there. Like, but it's just so stupid. And I personally think that was the liberals just trying to create the boogeyman to say, oh, you gotta vote for us. You gotta support us because we will help you from the big bad Americans. And I don't know. Looking at yesterday, I think it's almost like he's creating this sort of fortress America around us. We'll see what happens when they try to renegotiate USMCA. But
Yeah, it could benefit us, right? I mean, a strong American economy could benefit us, and he's obviously trying to look out for, the U.S. economy and being part of our free trade agreement. I mean, even on the automotive side, what vehicles would qualify for tariff and what wouldn't, could easily overpass any tariffs having to be
sure.
paid from the Canadian side, so or from the American side from products going over there. So like I felt like it was a huge win. I didn't really feel the sentiment out there. I felt the same way. I felt like the world reacted to the tariffs more than maybe what Canadians have, and so of course the global economy is affected.
Yeah, I
But
mean, the market's not taking it well. I mean, at the end of the
yeah,
day, what does this mean? I mean, the simplest thing to me is like price of everything's just going to go up in
yeah,
America
yeah.
because everything they bring in, which is a lot of stuff, is gonna cost more. From your cell phone to your cereal, I guess, right? So,
Hmm.
and that doesn't seem like a good move, but I don't know how it plays out. Trump's got a limited shelf life, notwithstanding a lot of the rhetoric out there. So we'll see. But I can't imagine that Canada being aligned with America, on policy is a bad move for Canada at this point. We could go through all the policy proposals ad nauseum, but I don't know. Even though I was having this discussion with someone this morning, like, I don't export anything to America. It's not my business model. I guess to some extent, if there's reciprocal tariffs, possibly stuff I bring in for renovations and repairs is coming from America and will go up if there's reciprocal tariffs, but not significantly. But if it has an impact on GM, I'm sure there's someone that's in my web that has some connection to it, or somebody was explaining to me Magna, like, that's what they do. They make auto parts in
Huge.
Canada.
Yeah.
And what are they, 40,000 people?
Yeah.
So that's serious. So,
and the banks are starting to say now too, if you're in one of those industries, steel, aluminum, automotive, they're going to be scrutinizing their mortgage applications a little bit more too.
Yeah.
So that's just like COVID, like servers and all that kind of stuff. In the States, did you ever were you ever selling buildings in the States where you utilized the 1031 exchange? Was that ever something
good
that
job, TK.
you
well,
used
I hope
before?
they bring that in here.
Good job.
No, we didn't. The deals we went in and out of, we just sort of isolated and brought the money back at the time. But lately, we've just been holding what we have for the long term. So I haven't sold anything in a while. But when we did, it was just to repatriate the money.
But you said that you hope that they bring it here. So if that was an option here in Canada, how would that impact your guys' business model?
Oh, it would. And again, another buddy of mine was saying, the velocity, European friend of mine, the velocity of money. I mean, that's what we need here, and that would be tremendous. Obviously, TK, in your business, I'm telling you, it'll trickle. People just are sitting on assets, especially apartment buildings, as a great example, because they keep saying, "What am I going to do with the money after tax?" And now, if like they can take that money, I don't know what exactly the restrictions are as far as asset class. I'm assuming it's real estate, but I guarantee you it's REITs. So all of a sudden you take one building that's been a pain in your ass for 10 years with repairs and whatever. And now you can buy, and you got $1 million in equity, you can buy $1 million in REIT shares that, may fluctuate a bit, but you're going to get a yield, or, or even bank shares, or, energy companies, or something stable, right? Or reinvested in, something else. It's tremendous. It should have been like a default position.
Right.
These are bad policies that they precipitated, and during election cycles. I happen to think that you may or may not disagree, but I think that the homeowner exemption on taxes on the gain, I think that should be repealed, but in favor of mortgage deductibility. Just that will probably balance it out. So I'm not saying if you have a house now, you have to pay tax on your gain.
You're gonna get killed in the comments,
killed,
Jason.
bro.
Maybe that's all right.
That's a sensitive one. Yeah.
I'm sure it is, but if you weigh it out, and you weigh that out in the terms of capital gains, et cetera, you have to look at the whole policy, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously Canadians have become sort of addicted to that, but I think that has sort of entrenched people in their home asset longer than they probably would have anyway. I don't know. It's hard to say, right? I mean, I follow the housing market only to the extent that it has an impact on, really on rents and condo sales and stuff like that. But
yeah,
who knows?
What about turning over tenants right now? So you guys have a building, you see opportunities in that building. You said you're spending a lot of time on management, right? So you're not acquiring new stuff. You're saying, how do I increase my net operating income in this building? So are you able to get tenants to leave? Are you able to do any N13s? Are you what sort of strategies right now do you feel is working, not working, or what you hope to work?
I mean, that is honestly never been a consideration for us. Obviously, we're just frustrated if there's not turnover, and we can realize big gains. But it's whatever the market generates, whatever the tenants' personal needs generate. That's how we get turnover. We don't do anything. And when I read about these stories of renovictions, I get angry because there's no such thing as a renoviction. If you're trying to force a tenant out, it's illegal.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you have to do an essential repair in the building, we've had floods, we've had fires, they got to go. But, if you're up to some funny business in that area, I mean, you're going to get charged. And again, we haven't had to pull those levers, but it makes no sense to me. I think it's small time landlords. So even just the term renoviction to me makes no sense.
Small
It's
time
like
landlords
saying,
is, yeah.
well, I don't know.
Highly leveraged guys need to do it. That's why.
I guess
Yeah.
it's like coming up with the term someone who's speeding. He's not a speeder, he's a abuser of the, speedometer or something like that. Like, no,
Yeah.
you're breaking a law that's already there, and you're using, some sort of catchphrase to make him seem like a worse person, or to try to paint us all with the same brush. But so that's not been the issue. And again, like I said, in the last 3-4 months, vacancies have ticked up, and generally it's tenants who are paying the highest rent. By the way, it's not because they have options. They can rent that brand new rental building across the street or that condo. Um, Generally, what I'm seeing on the new rental side from canvassing the markets that we're exposed to, like at Yonge and Egg or High Park or Forest Hill, the new buildings, they're throwing in tons of free rent, 1 or 2 months just to keep their sticker price high.
Mhm.
And that's fine. But again, eventually the demand should be there, but it's really hard to forecast it. So we're pretty cautious on that. But
Makes sense.
yeah,
What about CMHC? CMHC, good part as an organization, policy, everything good. Like good for the Canadian housing market. You think that they're restricting it? You think that they've been responsible for causing housing prices to get out of control? Are they being more favorable to larger landlords to help them operate their businesses?
they are. But I mean, the policy behind it makes sense. I mean, it's rental housing, right? So you're encouraging, I suppose, on a ideological level, for the benefit of the community, landlords to access cheaper money to rent units. So I don't know. I don't think that's an issue. If anything, the reason why, I remember I used to look at it compared to the States, because again, having lived there and done business there, and it's because Canadians borrow on the 5-year, and we were on this downward trajectory of rates for what, a 20-year bond market, bull bond market. So if you're borrowing on that 5-year, it just kept going down, down. Americans generally were fixed for 30 years. That's how they borrowed. So they didn't see as much appreciation from that end of it. And now that has unwound, at least it's bottomed already. But, people were borrowing 5-year money for what, 2.25 or something. And then that spiked to 5. So that to me was a bigger issue than CMHC. I mean, I think CMHC is, again, to the extent that you're Canadian and you want to build a nest egg and it's tax free, I think you also got to look at, it's generational, but I think the numbers, it used to be 70%, maybe it's a little less, of Canadians own a home. So obviously the majority of the country is benefiting from a strong housing market. So obviously you're millennial, you don't feel that way, or Gen Z, you're like,
Yeah.
I'm shut out of the market, but the majority of Canadians do. So I don't know. And CMHC seems solvent, right? It makes a lot of money. There's one private competitor, there was. So I think maybe we'll see how rough things get now, but I don't know. Canadians they want to pay their mortgage. That's like the last thing they'll fight to keep their units. Maybe not their investment condo, but their personal residence. So I think it's been a good policy.
You saw the Toronto Star article I sent you, Darryl?
No, like I'm the only person who didn't see that. I got
No,
sent that article by 8,000 people this
I
week.
sent it to you
Everybody's
first, though,
making
right?
videos.
I sent it first, right?
You sent it first.
Okay.
But
All right, just making sure.
I think Mark Mitchell made a video. I'm sure, Flynn made a video. Everybody's making a video. The $860,000 lawsuit.
Right.
Full
Yeah.
price.
Yeah.
Full price.
More than
What
full
are the
price.
damages? If they haven't sold it yet, how do they know what their damages are? They can just sue them for the whole amount of money?
You can sue anybody for anything. What are you talking
Crazy. You
about?
don't
They
know
could have
what's
sued for a
damages.
bucket of fried chicken.
What happens if they
on
sell it
top
for
of
$1 million? They made money.
Yeah.
I mean, that story
Drop the
was
suit.
the epitome of what's going on right at the moment, I think, or what you guys have been talking about for a year. The writing on the wall, and I suppose it'll be a case study in a sense. I mean, but if it's the building I'm thinking of that was highlighted with the huge loss, that was at Bathurst and Egg, I think, right? And I mean, beautiful building. To me, I look at stuff like that and it's like, let the market set the price and there'll just be eventually a lot of stability. Like, who doesn't want to live there? It's a nice building. If you overpaid, but the market resets. Easy for me to say because I didn't take the massive hit on
Right.
it. But
yeah.
but that's, I mean, look, if you bought I don't know what's gone up and down. Tesla at the peak, and with a lot of your nest egg, which certainly isn't inconceivable, and it crashed. How's it different? Or if you bought Bitcoin
Well,
and
you
it
can't
crashed, I mean,
sue. You can't sue Tesla. But the thing here is,
Got a hole.
I think what I take from this story really is Center Court and Mod and anybody else is basically sending a giant bazooka warning shot and saying like you figure out how to close or we're going to destroy your life, basically.
24%
guys,
interest.
they're
on-
enforcing their rights. I'm not in their shoes, but if I was, would I do the same? I think they have every right to enforce their rights. As a developer, and Darryl, this, these are things you want to mitigate against, and this is why you take a big deposit, and the structure, the unique structure of the Toronto pre-con market affords a developer that sort of level of comfort and safety, and by extension, the lender the comfort to fund a project. I remember, I'll tell you guys, I was in New York, I was at NYU, and I had a friend who was part of a very big real estate dynasty in Toronto, let's just say, or in Canada. And they were selling condos pre-con on the lakeshore in Bathurst area. And back in 2000 or whatever that was, it was just a wasteland, right? You had the CNE and Ontario Place, and that was it. There were condos. And he was telling me how many they were selling. And who the fuck wants to live out there? Who's buying out there? Because there really wasn't King West or any of that. He goes, you don't understand. There's investors offshore. They're just gobbling them up by the bucket. And, sure enough, it's what happened. And that continued for how many decades, right? And never made a lot of sense to me, but that was the model. And then eventually, you can't beat him, join him, in the sense that, we got into it and it made sense. And it gives developers that level of comfort. And, because otherwise you end up with, the New York model or the Miami model where you're on spec, you're building an entire 200 unit building on spec. Maybe you sell a few along the way, but people don't want, even the concept. You're telling me I'm paying $1 million, $1.5 million for something, and I can't see it.
Can't see
I'm
it.
buying
And
on a
I
fucking
can't
floor
tell you
plan.
when it's going to be finished either,
Or when
by
it's
the way.
finished.
If
Yeah.
it gets done.
If
We're going to have a clause that says it may not get done. Sorry.
Right. I mean, the renderings are nice, but the videos are pretty cool. But what's my view? I don't know. It's actually pretty amusing, and Toronto is unique that way. And frankly, I think when you look at the spillover effects on the market and the industry, how could that be a negative, right? Like, if it's a negative for anyone, it's negative for me because half those units are conservatively or competition for me. Because if we didn't have a giant condo boom, you'd have higher rents, and yeah, you'd have a few new apartment buildings. But again, I don't think Toronto, Canada is generated enough high-paying jobs that can afford that average rental rate required to generate a return on a rental building. I mean, when you look at that slow creep in our GDP per capita and the standard of living in Canada under Trudeau, that has deteriorated over the last 10 years. And, I mean, I think the federal government should have some responsibility. They're just not generating enough high paying jobs for it. And, when I hear housing affordability, housing crisis, in my mind, it's the flip side. It's like, yeah, housing's expensive, but we're not generating enough employment income to justify, the cost of housing. And that's an industry fault and the government incentives and everything else. So, but
we should probably have another 4 years of liberals
right. I mean, the new
to
guy
fix the problem, right?
Right. The older version of Trudeau, who's a little more quiet and circumspect, but
a little more evil. Yeah,
he could be. It's hard to really judge based on that. I mean, he had a couple of policies that made sense when he talked about putting money into new housing projects, but you certainly don't want the government funding or being a developer. I mean, that's never going to work out the way you want.
We've had too many broken promises for it to really buy into any of that stuff.
I feel like they just promised the same thing like 2 years ago. Like, didn't they just promise this a couple of years ago and put all kinds of...
Remember the pamphlet? What was it? The brochure that he made out? The catalog. The catalog
of architecture?
Yeah.
No, but seriously, they just announced like billions of dollars of programs to like get housing, like what is it?
Housing Accelerator Fund,
Housing
and
Accelerator Fund, and this fund and that fund, and we're going to build this
we're
many
not giving the
houses,
cities any money if they don't meet their targets.
right?
It's
Right.
like, well, they did close and they did some nursing rooms, and I think there were some bunk beds in that one there. So just give them their money anyways,
Yeah.
because
And now,
it'll be worth it.
and now Carney's like, I got an idea. Let's like build 500,000 houses like next year. We'll do it
No problem,
ourselves,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
we'll
can
do it
handle this.
ourselves and everyone
Yeah.
will be happy and you know it and it'll solve the problem. I mean, when you look at the costs, obviously a lot of guys have talked about all the taxes and fees, and you just add all that up, and then you also add on like in our project that we did with Tridel, I think we had to build like 1-to-1 bicycle racks. Like it was so
Oh yeah.
ridiculous. And
You
I
had a
love biking, right?
bicycle
But
repair center inside the
it's
building.
crazy. And the parkland, and they talk about DCs and parkland dedications. And I thought I read somewhere that the city has $1 billion in development charges sitting in an account earning
All of it.
interest.
No, like
All
6
of the
billion
Section
or something.
37 is
Yeah.
just sitting in the same account. They haven't touched, they haven't
Eh,
spent anything yet.
I
it's
mean,
okay.
even the biggest Chow fan out there, can they justify how our property taxes have gone up 17% since she's been mayor? Has anyone's services gone up 17%? Inflation hasn't. So,
Yeah.
how do you make sense of that? I mean, if anything, and the attitude she conveys to the market, like, if you're a business person, do you want to set up shop in Toronto when her biggest issues are bike lanes and name changes and and DEI projects and everything else? I mean, it really doesn't send the right message to the international community. So
I feel like
hopefully we
Olivia
can turn
Chow's
her over.
she's been vocal about trying to give multifamily owners as much rope as she could. I mean, property taxes and support. Like, I mean, it seems like any policy she comes up, she lightens the load a little bit for multifamily residential.
That smoke and mirrors. Like the
Yeah.
reason why
Hmm.
multi-res players didn't absorb as much property taxes in the last 2 years is because there's a threshold of, I think it's 3%, and if she goes over that, we can go to the tribunal and get the increase. And we don't want that. We don't want to have to go for an above guideline increase. It
I
takes
see what you're saying
time,
on a
but she'll look
above
stupid.
guideline rent increase. So that's
Yeah,
why it's
you fine. Raise my
smoke and
property
mirrors.
taxes 4%, and
Yeah.
I'll recover it from rent and from
Yep.
The tenants that don't have anywhere to go. So
And then
that was just
they'll blame her, and so
of
she doesn't want
course.
the heat from them. Okay.
No,
Yep.
she's clever that way, but
Yep.
it's fortunately they don't have a lot of power, but I don't know. I mean, Darryl, I know you shared some stories about the city being more amenable on the development side. I think that's fantastic. And when the market, revs up again, which it will, I think that'll serve everybody well. And if anything, again, I'm just trying to be best case scenario here, but one of the worst things in my mind that Trudeau did was he cut off foreign buyers, and to everyone's detriment. He didn't
Yeah.
make housing more affordable. He didn't create more housing in any respect. He's hurting developers. I mean, just the chill that sends to the market that, in my mind, because so much of the capital for new construction, again, in my experience, what I've read is it may be a local Canadian resident, but the capital's from offshore. So if you're sending that message for the most part, if you're sending that message to the market, we don't want your foreign capital here in Canada. We only want Canadians to own homes. Then, they'll just, pick up their ball and play somewhere else, I would think. And I think, we should play to our strength. That is our strength. We're not the sort of radicalness of America right now. We're a rule of law country. We've got all these resources. We're spread out, relatively safe. Bring your money here. Bring your money here. And by the way, you bought a unit. So you bought a unit and you don't even live here, and you're not going to use any services in Toronto, right? You're not going to use fire, school, police, anything. And we don't want your money. It's just
Your property
absurd.
taxes.
So
I don't even actually blame the government on that one, to be honest with you. I think it's a population sort of anti-immigration rhetoric that people are just blaming, jobs losses or overcrowding or, housing prices. We have an issue with that in North America. It's like when things aren't going well, you blame actually all the Western countries too. England's got a problem with it too.
sure.
You blame the immigrants. So it's actually a big political thing. So if, for example, Polly ever knows that would be a great, boost to our housing market, but it kills you on the political spectrum when you say, well, we're going to bring back the foreigners and we're going to get them to, buy your real estate. Everyone
Drive up your prices.
exactly. They don't like that, even though
Right.
it's obviously something that we need. So hopefully in 2027, when that policy matures and they say, okay, like we'll try it this way now, and it can just be eased in as opposed to someone
Mhm.
actually overturning it, because
I don't know.
it's political suicide, unfortunately. But
I've
you're
said
right.
it so many times, and maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm wrong, but like the condo scheme, like the way that it's organized, is maybe not the best idea in the world. Maybe all that foreign money needs to be siphoned into
Mhm.
building actual purpose-built rentals instead of spreading that capital over many different projects across the city through condos, right? Because it's necessary to get the project off the ground. Like
Right.
maybe there's a better way to use that foreign capital to get housing on the market that isn't like spreading out tenants throughout condo buildings and forcing prices to ramp up because everybody's bidding up in this stupid condo craziness. I don't know. Am I off base? Does it not
Look
work?
at the returns. Jason said 5% returns. How do you
Yeah, and I'm being
incentivize an
generous.
investor?
But
Yeah.
what were they getting on these other ones? Like
10 years ago, they were tripling
minus.
tripling their money on these
Oh yeah,
pre-construction
for
condos.
sure.
They're
You,
killing
you,
it.
in most instances, they would have made more money than the developer on a percentage basis for sure,
Yeah.
and obviously very little risk. But notwithstanding the unfortunate situation for some of the pre-con buyers that were revealed in that story in the Star. But yeah, I think sure, in a perfect world, you'd create more new rental housing that fed the market. I still I have difficulty getting, as a, again, cash flow investor, real estate investor, I have difficulty getting my head around the concept of there's a shortage of housing when there's like tens of thousands of unsold units. So I
Right.
understand that perhaps demographically the market is not demanding that. If you're a family of four, you just can't live in a 400 square foot unit. That I understand, but
Not comfortably.
not comfortably. But yeah, I mean, I think the only way to get low rise housing built is just expand the urban boundaries and relax, green belts and that sort of thing. And it doesn't seem like a problem that can be solved. Let's put it that way. It's you read, and again, when I was looking at the migration numbers, which were eye opening, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with it, but yeah, Toronto or Ontario even has a lot of out migration to Alberta as a big place, but still we're positive because the new immigrants want to start or at least land here. And I mean, it makes sense. Like, why wouldn't, no disrespect to any other city in Canada, but we've got the jobs here. I think for the time being, the education system, all the entertainment, the hospitals, and we have world class hospitals. I think
Sports teams,
sports teams. I
right?
was reading, absolutely, and the entertainment options. It's tremendous. So why
Yeah.
wouldn't you want to be here? And
Yeah, Drake
ethnically,
didn't come
any
from Winnipeg, right? Nobody gives a shit about Winnipeg, right?
he didn't. He didn't. There's a lot of good people in Winnipeg, and
There are.
including my family, but it's a limited
You're a
All
market
dick,
in
right.
that
Oops.
respect, right? No, I mean, it's
We love
confined in
Winnipeg.
that sense, right? So I think the capital, everything should ultimately flow to Toronto, and we don't take that for granted, certainly, but
No question about it.
notwithstanding the big city issues we have, I guess that hopefully will be resolved. I don't know. You have to take a step back and sort of realize where we are right now, and I do think that logically we're going to end up with a stronger housing and rental market in the next couple of years. But until then, you got to be super careful. And if your rental dollars, if your equity dollars are going to work, it just seems like a risky place. When they built a lot of the rental housing stock, I believe it was in the 60s and 70s. The term was, I think, MERB,
Yeah.
that they used, and there were just incentives. And my dad used to say, I think it was like a 5% guaranteed return by the government. There were all these incentives at the
You
time
would use your
to
other business income and write off other expenses from outside the real estate industry, right? So it allowed
exactly.
it allowed big business to participate in the construction of rental housing, and people abused that. All of a sudden, then corporations came in and made their way with the government's money, which makes sense, and it'd be a wonderful program for them to introduce again. probably have the same level of fraud again, but it gets houses built. So like,
Fraud
what
is
else are we gonna
good,
do?
baby. Yeah,
We need to get
gets
houses
it
built
gets
here
things moving.
somehow, right? So
For sure.
are you a real estate agent and you're looking to make a change anywhere in Ontario? Guess what? We're hiring. Franklin and Associates, #1 team in the GTA for all Remax teams, #1 team for all teams from all companies for number of units sold throughout Toronto. So if you're looking to make a change, best decision I ever made was to join Franklin and Associates. Go to jointeamleo.com and we can set up a call. It's challenging. Sure. I think like politically wise, Carney's coming in. The election polls were coming out in the beginning saying how like Poilievre was up 90% or something like that. Nobody was going to even vote for the Liberal Party. Now things are coming out again, like they're a little bit more even. I think that there's like diehard liberals out there, and I think that Poilievre's got to fight. I really don't think this is like he should just assume victory yet, and like he's got to come up with some more stuff. Like this whole 1031 exchange talk, that's huge, and I think we're gonna maybe even hear something else come up soon to try to seal the deal.
Problem
Right?
is it's huge for business people, and Canada's just
That's what we
no,
need.
Yeah, but there's not enough voters that
Right.
appreciate. A lot of people don't even know what it means when he says that, and a lot of people just are just looking to improve their situation, internal with naturally in a sense, and they look at, well, I don't have a stock portfolio to roll over, or a building to roll over, and into something else. It is the right move, and I think what happened with Carney is, I think uh, Poilievre was essentially shadowboxing with Trudeau for a full year or 2 years campaigning, and then all of a sudden now he's a ghost. Trudeau, he doesn't exist anymore, and the baby boomers who would probably have held their breath and because they hated Trudeau and they're going to vote conservative, and now they're like, well, here's the adults in the room, and I'm not going to bother looking too deeply into his past, or other than he was our Bank of Canada governor, and say, oh, he seems like a decent guy. I mean, all you got to do is read excerpts from his book where he essentially advocates for a very, very difficult transition to low carbon and net zero, and is against pipelines and all these things. So I mean, that's the guy I think is running because he put it in writing, versus the guy who's campaigning and stealing ideas from the conservatives. But it's a combination of the media I don't think gives Poilievre enough airtime, the traditional media, so he's not able to get in front of that baby boomer voter or constituent enough. And maybe there'll be a bit of a bump now that the tariff situation is calmed down a bit, but I don't know. Poilievre's and his team have done a pretty good job of convincing the country he's the only option, or he's the better option, and he certainly has a good resume.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most impressive thing that he's done in my mind that gives me any amount of comfort is he worked for Goldman Sachs, because Goldman Sachs to me is the sort of the pinnacle of deal making and commerce, and so if he had a tenure there and the connections there, he's really tapped into a lot of sophisticated and diverse economic levers maybe for us, but I don't like his judgment. He should have fired that candidate who was advocating for the arrest of the Chinese conservative guy. He should have fired him like that. That's called bad judgment. The guy basically wanted the Chinese police
Put
to
someone
take
up
him.
on rants. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's unethical. Poilievre did the exact opposite recently when I think he killed the campaigns of a few people that had some connections to India with similar ties. And I mean, that's character, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we're voting for. So
yeah, it's an interesting time. I mean, we got all these things going on, like as far as like in the residential side, just to sort of take it back here, like shrink down the scale of things, right? We had the month of March stats that just came out. So it's like this, quiet month of March. We see like the sales for the last 15 years on record at the lowest levels. We got new listings coming on at, one of the highest levels in the last few years, other than, when times were really good and the market was a little bit more active. The overall sentiment right now is prices aren't going up. So there's no sense of urgency that buyers have. Condo prices are going down pretty steadily. Houses are trading pretty flat, So it's like this not exciting market that people are like they want to get into, right? And the overall sentiment is down. And then you've got all these people who have to sell, like they need to sell. They are pushed by the lenders, by their
Mm-hmm.
financial situations, by their whatever their goals are to be able to move on from. Like they need to sell, and they're going to transact at whatever price you can get. And we're seeing people undercut, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
people who need to buy are going to dry up. It's just like if they're going to dry up eventually, and there's going to be less and less options for people to sell to, and that takes a lot out of the economy. When you
Oh,
got
sure.
sales half of what they were in 2021 and 2016, those are the good years. That takes a huge amount out of the home inspector, the contractor, the lawyer, the mortgage broker, the whoever it is who's
Architects, yeah,
yeah,
everybody.
Everybody.
yeah. And this
Even
is
the
There's
a
no question.
mechanics. You got
But
cars from all
every
those people. You got everything.
sure,
yeah.
I'm sure you're all, both being bombarded
Gas.
as I am with offers for all the things you connections you've had, consumer goods, because people are getting a little concerned. I think a lot of that pause, and again, my layman's view of the market, and not transacting in it day to day like you guys, but or at least by TK. But I mean, that's just pause that the tariffs caused. Nobody wanted to make any sudden moves. I mean, I knew people from all different kinds of businesses. I know people that had 80% of their business is exporting to the States, and they would have been directly impacted, and they
Yeah.
just dodged the bullet. And other people at some of their business, and other people who have some manufacturing in the States and were thinking of moving. And so, and again, what Trump has done, I think, to his detriment and ours, is created this sense of instability. And you want at the very least a reliable trading partner that can honor an agreement. I mean, it really all of for the most part what he's done is contrary, I think, to the agreement we have with them. Was even having a discussion with the lawyer saying, well, he can't do that. It's unconstitutional because it violates our agreement. I'm like, okay, so it's unconstitutional. And we're going to take that to the WTO and,
The
and what's their veto?
WEF. Right.
And what's
Yeah,
what's the WTO going to do to America?
yeah,
Slap them on the wrist. And by
no,
the time that happens, right?
they're not invited to
So
next year's conference.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, it's all pretty crazy stuff.
It's all pretty.
There's something that in the States was just voted in today. I should pull up my phone. Just voted in today that they were trying to basically prevent Trump from increasing any tariffs on Canada. You guys read about that?
Say it again.
No.
They had just come up with something this morning that I believe the Senate had voted on in the States in regards to not allowing Trump basically passing.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, it was. I wouldn't call it symbolic, but yeah, enough. I think they turned 4 Republican seats, and it's exactly it. They essentially the Senate repealed his executive order that was
Yeah,
applying emergency measures against Canada, I believe.
yeah,
And by I think that probably scared him, or might have, into going easy on us, because a lot of Republicans turned on it. But ultimately, that has to pass the House, which they thought it wouldn't. I'm sorry, yeah, the rest of Congress, and then he would have a veto. So it's more symbolic than anything, but it certainly would give him pause on being harsh on Canada, especially Canada. I saw in the Wall Street Journal and my business partners in the States, to the extent that they even think about this stuff, they don't understand why America would be so hard on Canada. And again, that's where I go back to the sentiment from Americans. Sure, I mean, more than half the country voted for Trump, but that doesn't mean they agree with tariffs on their closest ally. And in some respects, they remember how we went to Afghanistan for them. And I heard a great talk from a former ambassador who said that the Canadian ambassador was the first call after 9/11. He said, "Do you want us to invoke the clause in NATO that would have essentially said America's under attack?" And he did, and Canada was the first there at their side. And so, I mean, that's how Americans view it, fortunately.
mhm,
And obviously, there's no revolution. Like, they're not going to overthrow Trump. And I think Trump's instincts will recede. He'll recede any major harm against Canada if he feels that. So, but bottom line is that, to me, I think was sort of more symbolic, that move,
mhm.
but a good sign nevertheless.
Well, so how do we, as business people and Canadians, move forward now? Like,
Hmm,
do we believe that there's a threat of tariffs still? Can we feel comfortable that
it's
we're
tough.
okay? Like, what the fuck do we have to do here? How do we get some certainty back? Uh, do
Well,
we like? Is it a bluff? Is this all just a big bluff? Like, how do we react to this shit?
I mean, there's so much turmoil, right? Look at the stock market. I didn't check it at the close, but because it's just right now, but it was 3 or 4%, and it's from a downward trajectory. I think from Canada's perspective, even Carney, if he's taking off his politic hats, his hat is saying now we're going to go back to America and put our heads together and come up with a plan here. And the agreement we have, it has a shelf life, and I think it's January. So my guess is until we have a new trade agreement with America, it'll be a little bit bumpy as far as investment in Canada. But once we have that, then there should be some degree of certainty. Sure, you can argue that, well, he's not going to honor that agreement, but again, he has a shelf life too. I have zero belief that he would even think about running again, and I
Didn't he
also
say
don't.
that? Didn't he
He
just say
did,
that he wants to?
But you're only
but
allowed two terms. He's saying like we can make it work. We can make it work. We
He's
can get
gonna
a
change things.
we can do a third term. It's possible.
sure.
That's not true. That's not true.
Well, we shouldn't fall prey to just believing everything he says. As that's been the experience, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Again, including this. Like if we rewound the clock a few months when all this started, I think most people would have believed we'd come out about where we are now. With again, my heart goes out to anyone in the auto industry because it seems like it's going to be real rough out there. Maybe they can work their way through it, but beyond that, and the steel, I mean, those have always been not auto, but steel's always been an issue for America. So it's not dramatically different than I think what anyone would have expected. And I mean, our dollar rallied, but that's about it. I guess the stock market just got caught in the wave of the bad news. I mean, it is ridiculous. Like at the end of the day, prices for everything is going to go up. I mean, I don't know. Maybe in 5 years from now, there'll be more higher paying jobs in America, but their unemployment rate's 4%. So unless what your plan was to lure high paying manufacturing jobs back into the workforce that never came back after the financial crisis, I'm not sure what he's trying to achieve besides a symbolic victory or potentially revenue to offset the deficit. I think
Well,
you just got to be super cautious.
you said it before while you were talking, and I know I talk to all my friends that do business on both sides of the border, and I'm sure TK knows people. I mean, most people's solution to the problem was trying to figure out how to open up shop in the States, right?
A lot of people, yeah,
Well, so I
yeah.
mean, as much as I hate what he's doing to us, if the idea is to bring jobs back to that country, I mean, it's not an easy thing. It's a painful, horrible process, but it seems like if everybody's first thoughts and everybody, with all these lawyers and all these accountants and all these consultants, the best thinking is you better find like a partner on the other side of the border, or you better open up shop there, or you better get a bunch of inventory over there. Like everything equaled more over there. So
Like
if
the
that's
Taiwanese microchips, right? $100 billion.
well,
Open up
whatever,
shop in the States. So it's like it's
everything,
already
car
he's doing a good job. We
manufacturers,
can't
yeah,
we can't be like,
Yeah.
Trump, what you're doing is not working. No, what he's doing
for
is
you,
actually very
yeah,
effective for the
for
US.
those fuckers,
But I
yeah.
think that plan was in the works before the tariff talk. Even I think that was just possibly a response to maybe an existential threat from China reclaiming Taiwan.
I
I'm
think
not sure,
the
but
amount of money invested, he was able
yeah.
to leverage to get them to invest more. Yeah.
But I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. Was it even Mexico? The average Canadian auto worker, I think, makes $60 an hour. The average Mexican auto worker makes $6 an hour. It was something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you just and if sure, I mean, I could see Canadian jobs being displaced because the disparity isn't that great, but presumably, the first of all, and it's kind of ironic because all those auto companies are American companies, or most of them. I guess Toyota and Honda. But so if the jobs are here, there's still the benefits flow back to the shareholders of GM and Ford. I guess Stellantis is separate because it's multinational, but ultimately, yeah, we're at risk. But I mean, why are they here to begin with? Well, we've got the workforce and we've got free healthcare. I think that probably ends right there. And I think, again, having lived in the States a long time, I'm continue to do business there. We did a deal in New York City the fourth quarter, and apartment buildings, and the difference between Americans and Canadians is so slight, in my opinion. It comes down to healthcare and probably gun ownership. There's not a lot of distinction in my mind. I mean, they're more entrepreneurial generally, but Toronto versus Phoenix, or Florida versus Portland, Oregon, or Maine, like those are all different places, and so we operate the same way, rule of law, Western society, there's primarily English speaking. There's not much different. And that to me was a scare tactic by the liberals to say, look at America's your enemy. Look at Gretzky likes Trump. Okay, so Gretzky likes Trump. I mean, a lot of people voted for him.
He
And
wore a
good for you if you
suit,
did.
that bastard, instead of a flag on top of his suit, right?
I mean, it's just so ridiculous. Like, if anything, it's like a cancel culture. Like, just let people have their opinions. If you like Trump, if you don't like Trump, I don't know. Maybe it's a gray area. Maybe you like some of the things he says and other things that he doesn't. I mean, I don't think any Canadian would like what he's doing to us on the auto side and our economy and the turmoil he's causing. But maybe there's things he does that people do like. So I don't know. I think it's everything comes in the gray side for the most part. But
I see that. I
it's
see that Elon's getting turning over the Department of Government Efficiency
yep.
headship, right? That's in May or something like that.
He can't take the heat anymore, right? I mean, he was all
Yeah.
that was always
Poor
limited,
guy.
but
He's getting
I mean,
killed.
it's funny when he was complaining about, I think it was Tim Kaine or somebody, was laughing at the stock price dropping, and he said, "How can he be so cruel?" I think what you're doing can be perceived as cruel. I'm certainly in favor of government efficiency by a tremendous mark, but I think maybe it was some overreach there. I don't know. So I'm saying it's gray. And the people most upset about it are the people whose free lunch is about to end. I think it's
There's
not.
a lot of those people, though. That's the problem.
Yeah,
There's a
they
lot
make
of
a lot of
people
noise,
upset.
right?
Yeah. Well, they
Yeah.
know how the system works on top of it, right? They've been
Sure.
manipulating it for years.
And
right?
they control the media, so they're
They
able to
made
put
it.
out all the stuff that they want, to
Yeah.
make him look bad and to really, stick it to him. So
And they're
It's
doing the
true.
same thing here now. Like they've taken the playbook, right, from the States, and they're implementing it here. You see the rallies. Like it's the same story as we saw with Trump and Kamala. Like you saw
Yeah.
a Trump rally with like sold out stadiums, right? And then Kamala had 4 people. And now you have Pierre, who's going to like airplane hangars in Winnipeg and getting a full crowd, right? And you have what's his name? Biden? What's their guy? Carney. You have Carney going in front of like 8 auto workers who don't even want to be in the room.
Right.
They're like working, and they're forced to be there for the cameras. And this is who's somehow
I think it's the
actually
demographic, though, right?
the
If those
demographic.
Carney voters are baby boomers,
our
they're
parents.
they're just filling and they know who they're voting for. I don't know. I mean, it'll come. It is interesting in some of the charts you see. I don't think the conservatives lost too much support in the last month. I think it's been the liberals picking up from the NDP a lot and undecideds maybe. But yeah, of course, the grassroots for the conservatives is much greater. And I mean, it's also, Darryl, you said at the outset, like the 10 years, like you may not love what you hear from Polyev, but the guy is a decent man and he's certainly not radical. And you don't think the conservatives deserve a shot at giving at taking Canada in a different direction after at the very least the decline in our standard of living. Like what else would better define your
success,
relative success, or your relative appreciation for or happiness in the country. And so just give them a chance. I mean, it's not forever.
Give them a chance.
And that's generally how cycles work, right?
Yeah, we're about to give
we
it
vote
from
for the
like,
other guy. We all know the other guy is going to win. There's just a change in the story that they changed it to the other guy before the election.
Yeah, but now it's
Look
like
at
the other guy.
Right? We want the
who's
other
like,
guy.
What?
Yeah.
You really happy with that all-star cast of cabinet idiots? Jolie and
cast.
Freeland and Anand and Champagne, like they're all there.
We know the end of the movie. Yeah.
I don't think anyone's happy with them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've got very strong opinions on anti-Semitism in Israel, et cetera. And, you know, we know where they stand, you know, so if you're looking for some, you know, some security on in religious freedoms and things like that, like we don't have that with this group. And, you
No,
know,
but we
but
get trans washrooms. So, I mean, there is
trans
that
washrooms,
trade-off.
yeah, everyone loves the trans washroom.
Trans
I
washroom.
think these special interests, you know, if they just had the same rights as everyone else, I think most people would be happy, and they're looking for superior rights in a sense. But you know, the special interests have somehow managed to co-opt big government,
Everything.
and you know, and it ended in the States, right, and
That's shifting
abruptly.
now, though. Yeah, that's shifting here too.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, I
starting.
hope so.
If the conservatives win, that's going to be long
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
then
It's
he'll,
just fairness we want. That's all we're really looking for, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, I don't think they play it up enough. Like Pierre Polyev, it was adopted. His adopted father is gay. His wife is multiracial. You know, I mean, he you know, his deputy is lesbian. Like, I think he's a pretty progressive guy, right? Like, you know, he gets no credit for any of that from the most radical people. That
right.
because what, he wants to balance the budget, or you know, it talks about bringing job, you know,
Just
entrepreneurship
archaic
back.
standpoint on a conservative's policies, right? I think the line between the left and the right is so blurred now, right? So it's not just like every on one side of the aisle is going to have this policy and on the other side is going to have that policy. There's a ton of stuff that now is like inter mingled.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
look at
So
Trump was talking about increasing taxes on the rich and dropping it on lower income people. Like he's
exactly.
stealing Bernie Sanders' playbook.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. I mean, he is certainly not old school Republican. He's MAGA sort of morphed into other populist
What's best
rhetoric.
for the country, which is
What's
really what
best for
we
the
should have been doing that the whole
people?
time. How is this? Yeah.
Yes.
How is this a
The
novelty?
hell?
Yeah.
What is going on around here? That's
Yeah.
for,
I don't
it's
know.
like so crazy how things actually work. And then you dig a little deeper and you see how they really work. And it's like, I don't understand. How does it work like this? Like, who made up this process here? This is fucking crazy. Did you see like the mines in Colorado where they for the retirement so people can retire in the United States government? There's like an
No.
actual salt mine that you have to climb into and get the files. It's like it's the most insane thing, but this is like what Doge is uncovering, like the
Yeah.
craziest inefficiencies. But you couldn't, if you said to ChatGPT, like write the most inefficient way of doing a process for retirement in the government, it could not have come up with how it actually works.
And it's 10
so
times worse
fucking
here.
nuts.
Yeah.
America is
Amen.
9 times our population, and we have, I think, more CRA officers than they have IRS officers. I mean,
Sure.
just how is that possible, right? And that's just scratching the surface. So, you know, and I don't know. To me, attrition is the way to do these things. So you don't, you know, you don't necessarily fire everyone on at the outset. You just don't rehire people when the older people retire, and you end up with more efficiency and you know, and productivity. I mean, you know, that isn't that what we all wanted as a society. And so it's certainly something you can correct, right? Like, it's amazing how so many of these problems, COVID was something that no one could control, theoretically, right? So these are things that the policies should be able to at least address. And at the end of the day, it's just a question of you know, fairness and people working hard and you know, and standing behind principles and having a backbone. We know Trudeau didn't have one, and you know, he had zero morals or principles. And now Carney, I don't know. You know, it's, again, I have to restate, he'll be much better than Trudeau was, but you know, or better, maybe not much better, but I don't. He is, to me, he's not the right pick. And it just it trickles to everything, like especially, you know, real estate. At the end of the day, real estate should be a barometer for the health of the economy. And I always used to say, I still do, you know, when it comes to renting, there's no such thing as a speculative renter. So if I'm getting $2,500 for a 1 bedroom, that's the
It's
market.
worth
That's
it.
what
Yeah.
somebody can pay. I mean, it's not for me to say it's too much or too little, overpriced. Well, that's what the market can pay. It might be 2 people living together now, as opposed to used to be just a single dude. But you know, that's how it goes. So you know, the strength of a housing market to me is a function of the local economy.
Yeah. Well, Jason, we're at the end, so I just want to end with just from you personally, your guys' business. what's the future hold for you guys? You know, like what are your goals? What are your
Sure.
plans? How do you guys want to navigate the rest of your guys' business?
Well, we've had a pretty steady trajectory over, with a few ups and downs over the decades, and I want to just continue doing that. Value added deals to the extent we can find them on existing income producing assets and development where it suits us and where we see that green light. And I'm hoping my business continues for generations. I didn't start it; I'm continuing it. I love it. It affords me, a pretty decent lifestyle and flexibility to spend time with loved ones when I need to and have to and hopefully pass on to generations and we're super open to JV partnerships and talking development stuff with anybody. It's been a pretty strong aspect of our business, and that's how we grow, and through the strength of others and trust of others. So we've been fortunate and hope it continues.
Yeah, we hope so too. So thanks for coming on the show today. We appreciate your time. I learned a lot. It was a great conversation. Hopefully we can get you back in the future
Yeah,
and
I'd love to. Thanks
see
for
how
having
this
me
all
on, guys.
pans out. And
Absolutely.
we we'll say sayonara to everybody listening. If you're still watching, if you still maybe you just left it on in the background, or you forgot that you were watching in the first place, now's a good time to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave us a review, drop a comment. We'll reply to it. Leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you got your podcasts hits, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds great, guys.
Bye.